Hello, everyone. This is Dorian from the Rust Punks, and tonight's episode is an episode of The Night Shift, specifically talking about the new HBO Max series. I think you can also access it on Hulu, but I'm not a bit sure on that. But Welcome to Derry, a continuation of the 2017 2019 movies of It, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. This is before, well, I shouldn't say it's a continuation, it's a prequel to those. So, any Stephen King fans that want to watch or learn more about the story of It beyond what Stephen King has written in his book, I highly recommend checking out the show. It's super creepy, super cool, action packed. The first two episodes were good, but kind of weird and kind of slow paced. But episode 3 through 8 were fucking awesome. Very, very action packed, very creepy. A lot going on in between two different Stephen King books within one story, which I'll get to in a little bit. But if you're an It fan or a Stephen King fan, you'll love the show. It's all 8 episodes are already done. They're already out there. So it's all available on HBO Max. And like I said, I think it's also on Hulu. So the two stories that they combined in this TV show, it's a prequel. And by the way, they already have 2 more seasons set up for it. There's 3 seasons total. The first season's already done. They have 2 more set up. And each season is 27 years before the first one. Because you know how Pennywise in the book and in the movies, he hibernates for 27 years after going on a killing spree, eating and killing children. He hibernates for 27 years and then he comes back and does it again. Well, each one is a feeding period, but 27 years in the past of the previous season. But anyways, they mixed up 2 books in this story, or in this show. Because one of the characters in It, Welcome to Derry, is Dick Halloran. And if you recognize that name, he's the cook from the movie and the book The Shining. He was a guy who took Danny aside and talked about how his grandma could talk to him through his mind, and he recognized that Danny had these same powers, and his grandma called it Shining. And also in Doctor Sleep, I think he's in the movie and the book there too, but as a past memory. But he's a younger self in Derry, Maine, so far away from Boulder, Colorado. But he's in Derry, Maine, and he's a military officer. And the military has a lot to do with this show, and this, at least for this season, because they're trying to figure out. The military is trying to figure. Oh, and by the way, there's lots of spoilers in this episode of The Night Shift. So if you don't want to get spoiled on the show, click X now. Exit out. Leave the video. Because everything's going to be spelled out on this video. Everything you need to know about the show, coming from a guy who recently finished all 8 episodes. So, the military is a big part of this show. Because in this show, the military is trying to figure out how to release Pennywise from his restraints of Derry. So they can use them as a weapon of fear on the American people to install law and order and peace. Kind of like an Orwellian type society. A very dystopian society ruled by the government with Pennywise as their weapon. But thankfully, that plan did not work out. But it's about these kids, and they see creepy things going on around town and kids disappearing. And they eventually figure out that it's this evil force that disguises itself as a clown. And the monster, the creature, presents itself from episode 1 right away. But it doesn't turn into a clown because it's a shapeshifter. It can turn into whatever you want. Mostly what you fear. But it doesn't turn into a clown until episode 5 or 6, I think. Or maybe, yeah, I think it's 5. But anyways, and these kids, one of them is Mike's father from the book and the movies, and one of them is Richie Toyser's mother from the book and the movies. And another character that's in the military is working with Dick Halloran, who has The Shining, as I just said. And they're using Dick Halloran to find where Pennywise, or this creature, lives. They want to, like I said, the military wants to use him as a weapon. And so basically they find him, and they also explain how when it crashed, they explain why it only stays within Derry. And it says, and this is how it goes. when it crashed Earth on a meteor, it created these crystal formations when it crashed into the dirt, and like a chemical reaction that caused these crystals to form. And the Native Americans who were there when he crashed took the crystals and buried 13 of them all around this giant forest, which is now present day Derry. And they called these crystals pillars because these crystals have magic powers where if they create a border around Derry, which is what the pillars did, the monster Pennywise, cannot pass through those. He cannot, go beyond that invisible wall. And the military is basically also looking for one of these pillars so they can release him and wake him up. Because in episode 7, Pennywise, you think it's done because Pennywise goes into hibernation again. But then the military finds one of the pillars and they dig it up and they move it to another area, which opens up a gateway within the walls or the borders that the pillars created. And Pennywise wakes back up and starts killing it again. And then eventually at the end, the last episode, the kids rebury the pillar back into where it's supposed to be, and the military gives up. The military's like, fuck this, we're not doing this anymore. It's wrong, it's evil. But, yeah, it's a good show, it's a creepy show. Another character from the book, Mrs. Kirsch, who's also in the 2019 Chapter 2 movie, they explain her story about her abusive husband and how she's actually Bob Gray's daughter. Now, Bob Gray is the original Pennywise. He was a clown back in the early 1900s, and it saw him and saw how children went to him for entertainment, and that's how he disguised himself as Pennywise himself, so he could draw in kids. And a lot of people wonder, why does it mainly eat kids? Well, he prefers eating people with fear in their body, in their blood, like adrenaline, the chemicals in your blood and flowing through your body, because it makes the meat tastier. Like a predator that waits to scare you and eat you while you still have fear running through your flesh. And kids, it's easier to turn into their fears. They're scared of the monster under the bed. If they go to see a vampire movie, they're scared of vampires. It's harder to turn into adults' fears because their fears are more like, hey, how am I going to pay the bills this week? How am I going to get to work without a car? It's stuff that's harder to turn into. So he mainly scares kids and eats them that way. But Bob Gray was the original Pennywise. When it saw that he attracts kids, he used the image of Bob Gray to turn into. And anyway, so Bob Gray is Mrs. Kirsch's father. And when Pennywise comes back 27 years later, she thinks that that's her father coming back from the grave. And Pennywise uses that to get her to act, and it's kind of like a slave for him in many ways. She does homicidal favors for him or leads him to people or whatever. And episode 7, when you think the whole season's done, but there's one more episode after that, the Black Spot Fire happens. And that, in the book and in the show, that's when a hangout for black military members gets set on fire by racists. In this one, it was actually the cops. And they all die, they all perish in this fire, and Pennywise feeds on their bodies as they're burning up and stuff. So that happens in the 7th episode. And Mrs. Kirsch is the one that led Pennywise to the Black Spot. Because she knew there was going to be a shootout and a fire there. And she knew that Pennywise would love it because she thinks that Pennywise is her father. And she finds out at the very end of the 7th episode that he is not her father, and he kills her anyways. Because Pennywise is Pennywise, he's a sociopath, he's a monster that has no remorse and can kill anybody no matter what. The Black Spot Fire was actually the only time the actual show disturbed me. Because it's about racists killing black people by locking them in a building and setting it on fire. And shooting through the windows at them. And that disturbed me because stuff like that used to happen in real life. Here in America. During segregation times or Jim Crow laws or with the KKK. It's just... that bothered me to see people screaming and crying. And you know that stuff like that happened before. Whether it only happened a couple times or hundreds of times, I don't know. I wasn't there. I wasn't alive during that time. but it was good. Or well, it was scary. It was disturbing, but the show overall was good. I shouldn't say the black spot fire was a good thing, but the show was good. Um, like I said, it's on Hulu, so if you want to check it out. And one last thing with Dick Halloran, because this video is about to end. Um, After they rebury the pillar or the crystal that puts Pennywise back in hibernation, Dick Halloran reports to his military officer or his military worker and says, "Hey, I'm done with the military. I'm gonna go to Colorado and work at a hotel." And then he said, "How bad can a hotel be?" And we all know from the book The Shining and the movie The Shining, it doesn't go well. So that was kind of funny. It's like, how bad can a hotel be? And in the book The Shining, he gets injured, but in the movie, he's actually fucking murdered. So yeah. This is the Rust Punks channel, or just Rust Punks. We explore abandoned buildings. We have paranormal investigations as skeptics. And we also have this podcast called the Night Shift Podcast about anything dark, creepy, and scary. From true crime to horror movies to TV shows to horror books to ghost stories or ghost reportings, UFO sightings that have been reported, stuff like that. So anyways, it's cold outside. It's negative 10 degrees here in Midland, Michigan. Y'all need to stay warm and have a great night. Bye.